After 200 years of leading the Great Crusade across the stars to reunite mankind, the Emperor came home to Terra. The victory of the Primarch Horus in the Ullanor Crusade had eliminated the last major obstacle to mankind's complete control of the galaxy. In carrying the Imperial forces to triumph, Horus had proven he was the right man to complete the Great Crusade as War Master. The Emperor could now return to the throne world to begin the next phase of his plan to restore humanity's lost Golden Age. But he would not be going alone. With him came the Primarch Rogal Dorn and his Imperial Fists Legion of Space Marines. The Emperor had declared Dorn to be the Praetorian of Terra, its protector and the master of its defenses. As Horus pushed the Imperium outwards, Dorn would serve as the Emperor's right hand as he completed his great work. It was a decision that did not go unnoticed by the other Primarchs, including the War Master. Rogal Dorn had once been an emperor himself. He had ruled over a pocket-stellar empire called the Inwit Cluster. Inwit, the cluster's frigid capital, was an icy world tidally locked with its ancient star. Its weak light cast a permanent red glare across half of Inwit's Arctic surface, while the other was locked in perpetual darkness. This region of endless night, called the Splintered Land, was stalked by terrible beasts above and below its frozen ocean. The sunlit side was warmer, but no more welcoming, marked by bare rock and ice-crusted seas. Far above, ancient space stations and orbital shipyards circled Inwit's snowy orb. It was on Inwit's daylit side that the population made its home. They lived in great hive-like holes deep underground that had been carved from the ice. Above all else, the people of Inwit were raised to endure and survive. Their world had taught them that the price of weakness was death, both for themselves and their loved ones. Death was found in many forms on Inwit. Ice storms that could freeze a man solid in seconds were common, as were attacks by terrible predators that came to the dayside from the Splintered Land. Even a lapse in concentration could prove fatal if it allowed the killing cold to penetrate the crucial warmth seals of a hold. These realities forged a stoic and grim people, dedicated to the survival of the whole rather than just the individual. On Inwit, those who stood alone did not stand for long. Long centuries before the Emperor reunified Terra, the people of Inwit had conquered their own realm amid the stars. It proved to be an oasis of order amidst the horrors of old night. On every world they took, they assimilated the population, realigned it to match their own culture, and reinforced its defenses. With each conquest, their knowledge and the richness of their lives grew. Yet life on Inwit remained unchanged even as it became the heart of an empire. Its elite maintained the old values and ways. Its warlords and matriarchs commanded armies among the stars, but chose to live lives little easier than those of their vassals. It was this empire that would impart its values to the Emperor's son Rogal Dorn, who grew to manhood within the ice hives and eventually became its ruler. The gestation capsule of the Primarch named Rogal by his adopted kin had arrived on Inwit through the warp. The infant within was found and raised by the House of Dorn of the Ice Caste. As he grew to manhood, Rogal Dorn's innate qualities of simplicity, strength, and stoic fortitude matched perfectly with the culture of Inwit. In time, like all the Primarchs, his superhuman abilities led him to be recognized as the leader of his society, in this case, the Emperor of the Inwit Cluster. He pushed the Empire's borders out further than any who had come before him. He ordered and trained its armies and fashioned new voidcraft, the likes of which had never been seen before. But always, in the wake of the destruction brought by his armies, Dorn made sure that they replaced what was broken with something even stronger. Dorn in particular concentrated on building new defenses for his adopted people. Many worlds of the cluster had rings of powerful space stations built around them to Dorn's specifications. These were his so-called Fortresses of the Stars, and the greatest of all was the Phalanx. The Phalanx was a mobile star fortress of incredible size constructed during the Age of Technology. Dorn discovered its wreck drifting aimless through space. He repaired it and claimed it as his flagship. The great vessel was the size of a small moon, and its foredeck could dock a dozen Imperial cruisers. Its unimaginable firepower dwarfed that of entire fleets of capital-grade warships. And it was on the deck of the Phalanx, 4 decades after the start of the Great Crusade, that Rogal Dorn first met his father, the Emperor. Dorn's meeting with his gene father was unlike that of any other Primarch. He did not need to engage the Emperor in contests of strength, nor had he been assaulted by visions of his father's coming. He had no need to show off his own prowess or successes as a leader. Instead, Dorn was aware of the Emperor's Great Crusade, of his mission to better mankind across the galaxy. It was on a larger scale exactly what Dorn himself had been doing as he expanded the Inwit cluster. When the Emperor's fleet, the Principia Imperialis, entered Inwit territory, Dorn met his flagship in the Phalanx and offered it to the Master of Mankind as a gift to aid his mission. The Emperor was deeply impressed and immediately restored it to his son, who swore his own fealty to the Imperium. Dorn would transform the massive vessel into the mobile fortress monastery of the Space Marine Legion he was soon to command. They were the 7th Legion, the Astartes known as the Imperial Fists. There were few integrations of a Primarch and his Legion as swift or smooth as that between Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists. The ideals upon which the Imperium of Man was founded, and the purpose of the Great Crusade itself, matched exactly with Dorn's own beliefs. He found the warriors of the Imperial Fists to be embodiments not only of what he had built on Inwit, but of everything he had hoped to create for its future. Also, unlike the other Primarchs, Dorn made no real changes to his Legion's character or operations. Like the other Legions, the Imperial Fists began to draw new recruits not only from Inwit, but from other worlds they conquered. However, whenever Dorn established a recruiting fortress chapel on a new planet, he wanted the 7th Legion to be seen as guests, never masters. Like the Emperor himself, he sought recruits to serve the great cause of the Imperium, not vassals. Nor did Dorn want the Imperial Fists to be weighed down by the responsibilities of government. They were a military force first and foremost. Their purpose was to defeat the foes of humanity, not rule over them. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Imperial Fists rose high in the favor of the Emperor. Always dependable, they were used to reinforce flagging campaigns, hold crumbling fronts, and break deadlocked sieges. The might of the Phalanx alone broke the back of dozens of Xenos species. It hammered enemy worlds to cinders and served as the Imperial Fists' impregnable fortress and principal base of operations. While the 7th Legion specialized in building and breaking fortified defenses, they were also the Imperium's primary practitioners of void warfare. After all, starships were only another type of fortress broken free of gravity. They were soon the Legiones Astartes' recognized masters of ship-to-ship combat and boarding assaults. The Imperial Fists and their Primarch also had the great honor of being called on by the Emperor to fight beside him personally more than any other legion. For instance, on the world of Ascanisa, the Emperor called on Dorn and the Imperial Fists to form his vanguard alongside Horus and the Luna Wolves in breaking the resistance of the Shrouded Dynasties. Such favoritism was displayed time and again. When the Emperor needed to ensure that a conflict or Imperial compliance action was carried out exactly in accordance with his vision, he called upon Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists. This trust reached its high point immediately after the Emperor announced his retreat from the Great Crusade at the Triumph of Ullanor. He ordered the Imperial Fists to return with him to the throne world and proclaimed that Rogal Dorn would serve as the Praetorian of Terra. He trusted only Dorn to construct the defenses for his Imperial Palace. So high was Dorn in the Emperor's esteem that many of the Primarchs were surprised when Horus was named War Master instead. Certainly, Dorn was humble, reserved, and stoic, all qualities favored by the Emperor. But he was also truthful to a fault, blunt, and utterly uncompromising in his ideals. In contrast, Horus was a master of diplomacy and could maintain a political balance between the contentious factions of the Great Crusade. Dorn would cause conflict where Horus would find unity. Dorn would refuse all compromise, while Horus always found a way to satisfy everyone while moving the ultimate objective forward. The Emperor knew that his decision to return to Terra would provoke conflict among his Primarchs. For that reason, he needed Horus to lead them, while Dorn would best serve at his side. And there was much to do. After arriving on Terra, the Emperor called for Malcador and Kelbar Hal, the Fabricator General of the Mechanicum. No longer would they use their talents to support the Great Crusade. That campaign was safely in the hands of the new War Master and the other Primarchs. Instead, they would aid him in the pursuit of his new project. As the first step to that end, the Emperor created the Council of Terra, a new civil government for the Imperium. Unlike the War Council, which Horus would continue to lead, this council would attend to all civilian matters of state. This included enforcing imperial law and administering the crucial imperial tithe of resources and psychers. Malcador was named as the First Lord of Terra and leader of the new council. He would be assisted by the Fabricator General, the Chief Custodian Constantin Valdor, the Paternoval Envoy of the Navigators, the Grand Provost who enforced imperial law, and the leaders of the Astra Telepathica and the Imperial Administratum. The Emperor created the Council of Terror because he needed humanity to learn to govern itself once more. Mankind's lost golden age had not been the accomplishment of a single superhuman ruler. Instead, it had been forged by ordinary men and women whose drive and genius had been enough to lift their people to the stars. The Council of Terror would be led only by those who understood the Emperor's vision and were capable of implementing it. For the same reason, the Primarchs could have no hand in the new government. Cast across the galaxy far from Terra, they had not been raised by the Emperor and tutored by Malcador like the Legio Custodes. They had not internalized the vision and goals of their father from the start, like those who fought in the Unification Wars. They were products instead of the cultures of their homeworlds, all shaped by the brutal demands of the Age of Strife. They did not pursue a common path born of their understanding of the Emperor's selfless desire to aid their species. Instead, they were bickering children who competed against one another for honors and status in their father's eyes. This reality made them unfit to lead humanity's new order. The Imperium needed a unity of purpose above all else if mankind was to thrive. The Emperor's great project required him to leave all details of governance to others for a time. He intended nothing less than the elimination of humanity's need to use the warp for transport and communication. He descended into the Imperial dungeon deep beneath the Imperial Palace with Malcador and the Fabricator General. In his subterranean laboratories, his first step was to fabricate new devices called psychic engines and oculum test stations. These technologies were capable of identifying the latent psyker genes within the human population and erasing them. This was necessary because the warp was already growing turbulent once more, the entities within seeking to seduce new victims. The Emperor's ability to foresee the future was weakening, even as the strength he needed to maintain the beacon of the Astronomicon grew greater every day. The number of human psychers continued to explode across the galaxy with every passing year, but so many were weak-willed. Every psyker who remained unbound to the Emperor was a ticking time bomb, a potential puppet of the Dark Gods unable to fend off their temptations. Each psyker who fell to chaos could unleash demonic horrors on mankind through the portal of their own minds. Every psyker born represented the potential destruction of all the Emperor had accomplished since the end of the Age of Strife. Psychic powers had to be eliminated if humanity was ever to be secure again. Yet only 2 years into his work, the Emperor was forced to leave his labs. His Primarchs had been consumed by another dispute, one that Horus couldn't resolve alone. Many among the Space Marine legions had come to question the place of Psychers, of the Librarians, in their ranks. Only the Emperor could decide their fate. But he regretted every moment away from his work on Terra. Time itself had become his greatest foe.